My sister Vivian looked me dead in the eye and said I was embarrassing the family. Standing in our childhood kitchen, surrounded by relatives I had helped support for years, she announced that my blue-collar job made me unworthy of sitting at their table. What she did not know was that I had been secretly funding her entire college education through a trust fund our grandmother left me. The betrayal cut deeper than any Thanksgiving knife ever could. But before I tell you how I got my revenge, drop a comment below about where you are watching from. Have you ever been treated like you were less than by your own family? Hit that like button if you have ever felt underestimated, and subscribe because this story gets wild. Trust me, what happens next will make you believe in karma again. Let me take you back to where this nightmare began. My name is Scarlett Rivers, and I have been working as an HVAC technician for 8 years. I make good money, really good money. Most people assume that because I wear work boots and get my hands dirty, I must be struggling financially. They could not be more wrong. When our grandmother passed away 3 years ago, she left me a substantial inheritance. Grandma Rose always believed in me, even when the rest of my family looked down on my career choice. She knew I had dropped out of college to help support our family when Dad lost his job during the recession. While my younger sister Vivian got to continue her education and pursue her dreams of becoming a lawyer, I sacrificed my own academic aspirations to keep our family afloat. The inheritance came with a twist that would prove prophetic. Grandma Rose had set up 2 separate trust funds, one for me and one for Vivian. However, she made me the trustee of both accounts, giving me complete control over the distributions. She believed I had proven my responsibility and maturity through my sacrifices for the family. Vivian never knew about the specifics of the trust arrangement. She thought the money for her education came from our parents' savings and student loans. Meanwhile, I had been quietly transferring money from her trust fund to cover her tuition, housing, meal plans, textbooks, and even her sorority fees. Over 3 years, I had provided her with nearly $200,000 in educational expenses. Our parents, Margaret and Robert Rivers, had been struggling since Dad's layoff. Mom worked part-time at a local boutique, barely covering the household expenses. They were grateful that Vivian's education seemed to be covered, never questioning where the money actually originated. I had told them that Vivian had received generous financial aid packages, and they believed me without digging deeper. The irony was not lost on me. While Vivian lived comfortably in her sorority house, attending parties and networking events, I was working 60-hour weeks in crawl spaces and on rooftops, ensuring her lifestyle remained uninterrupted. I genuinely wanted her to succeed. Despite our different paths, she was my little sister, and I loved her. But Vivian had always harbored resentment toward my career choice. She frequently made comments about how I was wasting my intelligence on manual labor. During family gatherings, she would steer conversations away from my work achievements and redirect attention to her academic accomplishments. She seemed ashamed of having a sister who worked in what she considered a blue-collar profession. The tension escalated when Vivian started bringing her law school friends around. These were privileged kids from wealthy families who looked down their noses at anyone without an advanced degree. Vivian began adopting their attitudes, distancing herself from her working-class roots. She started speaking differently, dressing more formally, and acting like she belonged in their elite circle. Last Christmas, she had made a cutting remark about how I should consider going back to school so I could make something of myself. She suggested that perhaps she could help me find a more respectable career path once she became a successful attorney. The condescension in her voice was unmistakable, and it stung more than she realized. Our parents tried to mediate, but they had their own biases. They were proud of Vivian's academic achievements and secretly worried about my long-term financial security. They did not understand that skilled trades could be incredibly lucrative, especially in our region, where qualified HVAC technicians were in high demand. I had started my own small business 2 years earlier, hiring 3 other technicians and building a solid client base. My company specialized in commercial installations and emergency repairs, which commanded premium rates. On paper, I was probably earning more than most of Vivian's law school professors, but my family never bothered to learn these details about my professional life. The disconnect between perception and reality was becoming increasingly painful. While my family saw me as the one who needed help and guidance, I was actually the one providing financial stability for all of them. I had been paying the property taxes on our family home, covering my parents' medical expenses and funding Vivian's entire education. But I kept these contributions secret, partly out of love and partly out of pride. I wanted my family to respect me for who I was, not just appreciate me for what I could provide financially. Unfortunately, this approach was about to backfire spectacularly. Thanksgiving morning arrived with an unseasonable warmth that had me questioning whether we were experiencing another climate change anomaly. I had driven over to the family house early to help Mom prepare the feast, bringing my famous sweet potato casserole and a bottle of expensive wine I had been saving for a special occasion. Vivian arrived fashionably late, sweeping into the house like she owned the place, followed by her boyfriend Marcus and two of her law school friends, Brittany and Jonathan. I immediately sensed trouble when I saw how they were dressed, like they were attending a country club event rather than a family dinner. The initial interactions were cordial enough. I complimented Vivian on her new designer outfit, and she gave me a patronizing smile while eyeing my casual sweater and jeans with obvious disapproval. Marcus, whom I had met only twice before, barely acknowledged my existence, focusing instead on impressing our parents with stories about his internship at a prestigious law firm. During the appetizer course, Brittany began discussing her family's vacation home in the Hamptons, while Jonathan shared anecdotes about his father's investment banking career. The conversation naturally gravitated toward their privileged backgrounds and future career prospects. I tried to contribute by mentioning a recent commercial project I had completed for a major hotel chain, but my comments were met with polite but dismissive nods. The real trouble started when Uncle Frank Dad's younger brother arrived with his family. Frank had always been supportive of my career choice, partly because he worked in construction and understood the value of skilled trades. He immediately began asking about my business, genuinely interested in my recent expansion plans and the new contracts I had secured. As I enthusiastically described a complex commercial installation I had recently completed, I noticed Vivian's friends exchanging glances and suppressing smirks. Brittany whispered something to Jonathan, who barely contained his laughter. The disrespect was obvious, but I tried to ignore it and continue the conversation with Uncle Frank. Then Marcus decided to join the conversation, but not in a supportive way. He began asking condescending questions about my work, framing them as if he were genuinely curious, but clearly intending to highlight what he perceived as the limitations of my profession. He asked whether I planned to stay in manual labor forever, or if I had considered pursuing higher education to advance my career prospects. The room fell silent. I could feel the tension building as family members realized we were heading toward a confrontation. I calmly explained that I loved my work, found it intellectually challenging, and had built a successful business that provided financial security and personal satisfaction. Vivian chose that moment to strike. Standing up from her chair with theatrical flair, she announced that she needed to address something that had been bothering her for months. She said she was tired of being embarrassed by having a sister who worked in manual labor, especially when she was trying to build professional relationships in the legal community. Her words hit like physical blows. She continued explaining to her friends and boyfriend that she had been hoping I would eventually grow out of my blue-collar phase and pursue a more respectable career. She suggested that my presence at family gatherings was becoming problematic because it reflected poorly on our family's social standing. The ultimate insult came when she suggested that perhaps I should consider skipping future family events until I had made something more of myself. She recommended that I use the time to enroll in community college courses that might prepare me for a white-collar career path. The room erupted. Uncle Frank immediately defended me, pointing out that skilled trades were essential to society and could be highly profitable. Mom tried to mediate, looking horrified by Vivian's public attack. Dad sat in stunned silence, clearly torn between his daughters. But Marcus and Vivian's friends were nodding in agreement, validating her cruel assessment. Brittany even added that she understood Vivian's position because she would be mortified if her siblings worked in manual labor while she was building a professional reputation. I felt my world collapsing around me. This was my family, the people I had been supporting and protecting for years, and they were allowing me to be humiliated by strangers who knew nothing about my actual accomplishments or financial contributions. The breaking point came when Vivian explicitly asked me to leave, stating that my presence was making her guests uncomfortable and that she wanted to enjoy the holiday without the embarrassment of explaining my career choice to people who mattered to her future. I stood up slowly, my hands trembling with rage and heartbreak. Looking directly at Vivian, I said quietly that I would indeed be leaving, but that she might want to reconsider her attitude. She laughed mockingly and suggested that perhaps this would motivate me to make better life choices. As I gathered my coat and purse, I made a decision that would change everything. Walking past the dining room table where Vivian sat smugly surrounded by her sycophantic friends, I stopped and looked her directly in the eye. I told her that since she found my blue-collar income so embarrassing, perhaps she would prefer to fund her own education going forward. The confusion on her face was immediate and obvious. I explained that she might want to check with the financial aid office about her funding situation for the upcoming semester. The room fell silent as the implications of my words began to sink in. Vivian's confident expression faltered, replaced by uncertainty and growing alarm. I wished everyone a happy Thanksgiving and walked out of the house, leaving behind a family that had just learned they were about to discover the true cost of their prejudice. The drive home from my family's house felt surreal, like I was moving through a dream where everything familiar had suddenly become foreign and threatening. My hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly that my knuckles turned white, and I had to pull over twice to collect myself before continuing the journey to my apartment. Once safely inside my own space, I sat in my kitchen staring at my laptop screen cursor hovering over the online banking portal that would give me access to the trust fund management system. For 3 years, I had been automatically transferring money to cover Vivian's expenses without question, treating it as a sacred responsibility that honored both Grandmother Rose's memory and my love for my sister. But everything had changed in those devastating moments around the Thanksgiving table. The sister I had been supporting was not the person I thought I knew. She had revealed herself to be someone who valued social status over family loyalty, someone willing to humiliate me publicly to impress people who barely knew her name. I logged into the trust management system and reviewed the detailed transaction history. The numbers told a story of unwavering dedication and sacrifice that Vivian had never acknowledged because she had never known it existed. Spring semester tuition, $12,000. Fall semester tuition, $12,500. Housing costs, $18,000 annually. Meal plans, textbooks, sorority fees, spring break trips, new laptop, professional wardrobe for internships. The list went on and on. $237,000 over 3 years. That was the exact amount I had quietly transferred from her trust fund to support the lifestyle that had apparently made her feel entitled to treat me with contempt and disrespect. But I needed to be strategic about how I handled this situation. Simply cutting off the funding without explanation would be emotionally satisfying, but potentially legally complicated. I needed to document everything properly and ensure that my actions were completely defensible from both legal and ethical perspectives. The first step was consulting with my own attorney, someone I had worked with during the establishment of my business. Jennifer Walsh was a sharp, no-nonsense lawyer who specialized in estate planning and family trust management. She had helped me navigate the initial inheritance paperwork and understood the legal framework governing the trust funds. Monday morning found me sitting in Jennifer's office explaining the situation with as much objectivity as I could manage. She listened carefully occasionally, asking clarifying questions about the trust structure and the specific language in Grandmother Rose's will. Jennifer's assessment was both reassuring and sobering. As the designated trustee, I had complete legal authority to determine how and when distributions were made from Vivian's trust fund. However, she cautioned me about the importance of acting in good faith and following proper procedures to avoid potential family litigation. She recommended that I provide formal written notice to Vivian about the change in funding status, giving her adequate time to arrange alternative financial support for the upcoming semester. This approach would protect me legally while ensuring that Vivian faced the natural consequences of her actions. While Jennifer prepared the necessary documentation, I began reaching out to allies who could provide emotional support and practical advice during what was certain to become a difficult period. The first person I called was Uncle Frank, who had witnessed the Thanksgiving disaster firsthand. Frank was furious about how I had been treated, but more importantly, he was shocked to learn about my financial contributions to the family. He had suspected that something did not add up about Vivian's education funding, but he had never imagined the scope of my hidden generosity. His reaction gave me confidence that I was not overreacting or being vindictive. Frank confirmed that Vivian's behavior had been completely unacceptable, and that she needed to face real consequences for her actions. He also offered to serve as a witness to the Thanksgiving incident, if needed. Next, I contacted my mentor in the HVAC industry, Patricia Hendricks, who owned one of the most successful commercial installation companies in the region. Patricia had taken me under her wing when I first started my business, providing guidance and connections that had been instrumental in my success. Patricia's perspective was particularly valuable because she had faced similar challenges throughout her career in a male-dominated industry. She understood the importance of standing up for professional dignity and not allowing anyone to diminish your achievements based on outdated prejudices about skilled trades. She also provided practical advice about managing the potential fallout from my decision. Patricia suggested that I prepare a comprehensive portfolio documenting my professional accomplishments, financial success, and community contributions. This documentation would help me maintain perspective during difficult conversations with family members who might try to guilt me into reversing my decision. The portfolio idea proved to be therapeutic as well as practical. As I compiled evidence of my achievements over the past 8 years, I began to see my career through more objective eyes. I had completed over 15 major commercial projects employed. Several people contributed thousands of dollars to local charities and built a reputation for excellence that had earned me referrals from major construction companies. My annual income had grown steadily, reaching a level that exceeded what many professionals earned after decades in their fields. I owned my home, had substantial savings, maintained excellent credit, and had built a business that could continue growing for years to come. Meanwhile, I began hearing from family members who were trying to process what had happened during Thanksgiving dinner. Mom called repeatedly, alternating between apologizing for not defending me more forcefully and begging me to reconsider my decision about Vivian's funding. These conversations were heartbreaking because they revealed how deeply the family had internalized harmful stereotypes about blue-collar work. Mom kept suggesting that perhaps Vivian had just been having a bad day, or that her friends had influenced her behavior. She seemed unable to accept that Vivian's actions reflected genuine contempt rather than a momentary lapse in judgment. Dad's response was more complex. He eventually admitted that he had always worried about my career choice, not because he doubted my intelligence or capabilities, but because he feared I would face exactly the kind of discrimination that Vivian had displayed. His concerns came from love and protectiveness, but they had inadvertently contributed to the family dynamic that enabled Vivian's entitled attitude. The most surprising ally emerged from an unexpected source. Vivian's boyfriend Marcus called me directly apologizing for his behavior during Thanksgiving dinner and asking if we could meet for coffee to discuss the situation. Initially, I suspected this was some kind of manipulation orchestrated by Vivian, but Marcus insisted that she had no knowledge of his outreach. He explained that he had been reflecting on the dinner conversation and realized that he had completely misjudged both my career and my character. Our coffee meeting revealed that Marcus had grown up in a working-class family before earning scholarships that enabled him to pursue higher education. He understood the value and dignity of skilled work, but he had been trying so hard to fit in with his wealthy law school classmates that he had abandoned his own values. Marcus became an unexpected source of inside information about Vivian's reaction to my ultimatum. According to him, she had initially dismissed my threat as an empty gesture designed to get attention. She was convinced that I lacked both the resources and the determination to actually cut off her funding. This information was crucial because it revealed that Vivian still had no understanding of the financial reality underlying her education. She genuinely believed that the money came from our parents' savings and federal financial aid programs. Her ignorance would make the eventual revelation even more devastating. As December progressed, I finalized all the legal documentation necessary to formally terminate the trust fund distributions. Jennifer had prepared a comprehensive notice that explained the situation clearly while maintaining professional language throughout. The notice would be delivered in early January, giving Vivian exactly 30 days to arrange alternative funding for the spring semester. This timeline was generous enough to demonstrate good faith while being firm enough to ensure that she faced immediate consequences for her actions. But the most important part of my preparation involved building a support network that could sustain me through the emotional challenges ahead. In addition to Uncle Frank, Jennifer, Patricia, and surprisingly Marcus, I had reached out to several close friends who understood my situation and supported my decision. This network would prove essential when Vivian finally learned the truth about her funding source, and the family dynamics exploded into open warfare. January 15th arrived like a thunderclap that shattered whatever remained of my family's artificial harmony. The formal notice terminating Vivian's trust fund distributions had been delivered exactly 2 weeks earlier, and the explosion of rage and disbelief that followed had been both predictable and devastating to witness. Vivian's initial response had been complete denial. She called me screaming, insisting that I was lying about controlling her education funding and demanding to speak with our parents about my supposed delusions. When Mom and Dad confirmed that they had never had the financial resources to cover her extensive college expenses, the reality began to sink in with brutal clarity. The second phase involved desperate bargaining. Vivian showed up at my apartment unannounced, alternating between tearful apologies and angry accusations. She claimed that her Thanksgiving behavior had been influenced by stress and peer pressure, that she had never meant to hurt me so deeply, and that she would do anything to repair our relationship. But her apologies rang hollow because they focused entirely on the consequences she was facing rather than acknowledging the genuine harm she had caused me. She kept insisting that cutting off her funding would destroy her future, but she never addressed the fact that she had publicly humiliated me and attempted to exclude me from family gatherings. When emotional manipulation failed, Vivian shifted to legal threats. She hired a consultation with an attorney who specialized in trust and estate disputes, hoping to find some mechanism for forcing me to continue the distributions. Unfortunately for her, Jennifer had structured everything perfectly, and Grandmother Rose's will gave me absolute discretionary authority over the funding decisions. The family pressure intensified exponentially as word spread about the situation. Extended relatives began taking sides, with some supporting my decision, while others accused me of being vindictive and cruel. The holidays had been completely ruined, and every family gathering became a potential battlefield where the conflict could erupt without warning. But the most devastating betrayal came from the person I had least expected, Marcus, who had seemed genuinely supportive during our coffee conversations throughout December. I discovered his true loyalties when Vivian accidentally forwarded me a text message that revealed the scope of his deception. The message chain showed months of communication between Marcus and Vivian strategizing about how to manipulate me into reversing my decision. Marcus had been reporting back to Vivian about everything I told him during our supposedly confidential conversations, including details about my emotional state, my financial situation, and my legal strategy. Even worse, Marcus had been actively working to undermine my support network. He had contacted several of my allies, including Uncle Frank and some of my professional contacts, spreading carefully crafted lies about my mental stability and motivations. He portrayed me as someone having a breakdown who was taking out personal frustrations on an innocent student. The revelation hit me like a physical blow. I had genuinely begun to trust Marcus, appreciating what seemed like his honest reflection about his own mistakes and his commitment to supporting my position. Learning that every conversation had been a calculated performance designed to gather intelligence for Vivian's counterattack felt like a profound violation. Marcus had even gone so far as to suggest specific legal strategies to Vivian's attorney based on information I had shared with him about Jennifer's advice and the trust structure. He had essentially been functioning as a spy within my inner circle, gathering information that could be used against me in potential litigation. The betrayal became even more sinister when I realized that Marcus and Vivian had been documenting our conversations, possibly hoping to build a case that I was acting irrationally or vindictively in my role as trustee. They had been setting elaborate traps, asking leading questions designed to elicit responses that could be taken out of context and used to portray me as an unfit fiduciary. This discovery forced me to completely reevaluate my entire support network and communication strategy. I immediately contacted Jennifer to inform her about the security breach and to ensure that none of our privileged communications had been compromised. Fortunately, I had been careful to keep my most sensitive legal discussions limited to formal attorney-client meetings. The emotional impact of Marcus's betrayal was devastating in ways that went beyond the immediate practical concerns. It reminded me of all the reasons I had been skeptical about trusting people from Vivian's social circle in the first place. These were individuals who viewed relationships as transactional opportunities rather than genuine human connections. But the betrayal also revealed something crucial about Vivian's character that I had been reluctant to fully acknowledge. Her willingness to orchestrate such an elaborate deception demonstrated that her Thanksgiving behavior had not been an aberration caused by stress or peer pressure. It reflected her fundamental values and her genuine contempt for me as a person. Vivian had not simply made a mistake that she regretted. She had made a calculated decision to humiliate me publicly, and when that decision resulted in consequences she disliked, she had chosen to respond with manipulation and deception rather than genuine accountability. The realization was liberating in an unexpected way. For months, I had been struggling with guilt and doubt about my decision to cut off her funding. I had wondered whether I was being too harsh, whether I should give her another chance, whether family loyalty demanded that I overlook her hurtful behavior. But Marcus's betrayal eliminated any remaining ambiguity about the situation. This was not a family conflict that could be resolved through better communication or mutual understanding. This was a fundamental clash between people with incompatible values and moral frameworks. As January progressed toward February, the pressure campaign against me intensified. Vivian had organized several family members into what amounted to an intervention, insisting that I was destroying the family through my stubborn refusal to forgive and forget. They portrayed her as a young woman whose entire future hung in the balance because of my unforgiving nature. The intervention was scheduled for Super Bowl Sunday at my parents' house under the guise of a normal family gathering. When I arrived, I found myself facing a coordinated attack from multiple directions, with different family members taking turns trying to guilt me into reversing my decision. But this time, I was prepared for battle, and I had an ally they never saw coming. The intervention ambush that awaited me at my parents' house would have been devastating 6 months earlier, but Marcus's betrayal had inadvertently prepared me for exactly this kind of coordinated manipulation. Walking into that living room filled with stern-faced relatives felt like entering a courtroom where I was both the defendant and my own attorney. Vivian had orchestrated the entire event with theatrical precision. She sat in the center of the room, surrounded by carefully selected family members who had been primed with selective information about our conflict. Aunt Linda, cousin Sarah, and even my grandfather had been recruited to participate in what was essentially a psychological warfare operation designed to break my resolve. The presentation began with Mom tearfully explaining how the family was being torn apart by my unforgiving attitude. She had prepared a speech about the importance of family unity and second chances, conveniently omitting any mention of the specific words Vivian had used to humiliate me at Thanksgiving dinner. Vivian followed with her own performance complete with crocodile tears and carefully rehearsed apologies. She claimed to have learned valuable lessons about respecting different career paths and promised that she would never again allow peer pressure to influence her treatment of family members. The performance was impressive, but I could see Marcus coaching her from the sidelines with subtle nods and gestures. Then came the coordinated assault from the extended family members. One by one, they shared prepared statements about forgiveness, family loyalty, and the importance of supporting young people through their educational journeys. Grandfather spoke about how Grandmother Rose would have wanted the family to stay united, conveniently ignoring the fact that she had specifically given me control over the trust funds. The emotional manipulation reached its peak when cousin Sarah's 8-year-old daughter was brought into the room to ask why everyone was so sad and whether I could fix the problem by being nicer to Aunt Vivian. Using a child as a prop in their manipulation campaign crossed every line of decency, but it also revealed the desperate depths they were willing to plumb to get their way. But I had not come to this confrontation empty-handed. Throughout the weeks since Marcus's betrayal, I had been working with Jennifer to compile a comprehensive dossier documenting not just the financial history of Vivian's trust fund, but also the broader pattern of behavior that had led to my decision. The dossier included detailed financial records showing the exact amounts I had transferred over 3 years, along with corresponding records of Vivian's living expenses, social activities, and academic performance. The numbers painted a clear picture of someone who had been living a privileged lifestyle entirely funded by someone she claimed to be ashamed of. More importantly, I had documented evidence of the manipulation campaign that had followed my decision to cut off funding. Jennifer had helped me compile a timeline of the various pressure tactics, legal threats, and deception attempts that Vivian and Marcus had employed over the past month. The most damaging evidence involved Marcus's betrayal and the text message chain that revealed the scope of their coordinated deception. I had screenshots of conversations where they discussed strategies for manipulating family members, legal tactics for challenging my authority as trustee, and even plans for publicly humiliating me if their other approaches failed. But my most powerful ally in this confrontation was someone nobody in the room had expected to see: Patricia Hendricks, my mentor in the HVAC industry, who had arrived at my request to provide an outside perspective on the situation. Patricia's presence transformed the entire dynamic of the intervention. As a successful businesswoman who had built a multi-million-dollar company from nothing, she commanded immediate respect from the family members who had been trying to diminish my professional accomplishments. She began by calmly explaining the realities of the skilled trades industry and the level of expertise required to succeed in commercial HVAC installation. Patricia detailed my professional achievements with specific examples that demonstrated both technical competence and business acumen that rivaled any white-collar professional. Then Patricia shifted to the financial evidence, methodically walking through the trust fund documentation and explaining how my support had enabled Vivian's entire educational experience. She pointed out that Vivian had been receiving more financial support than most trust fund recipients ever see, yet had used that privilege to publicly attack the person providing it. The family's confident expressions began to falter as Patricia presented the evidence of Marcus and Vivian's manipulation campaign. Seeing their deception tactics laid out in black and white made it impossible to maintain the fiction that this was simply a misunderstanding between sisters who needed to communicate better. Patricia's most devastating moment came when she addressed the child manipulation directly. She looked at cousin Sarah and explained that using children to emotionally manipulate adults was a form of psychological abuse that reflected poorly on everyone involved in planning this intervention. The room fell silent as the implications of Patricia's presentation sank in. The family members who had been recruited for this ambush began to realize that they had been given incomplete and misleading information about the situation. Several of them started asking questions about details they had never heard before. But Patricia was not finished. She had brought with her a folder containing character references from my professional network documentation of my community service activities and testimonials from clients who had worked with my company. The portfolio painted a picture of someone who had built a respected career while maintaining the highest standards of integrity and reliability. The contrast with Vivian's behavior became impossible to ignore. Here was evidence of someone who had quietly supported her family for years while building a successful business and contributing positively to the community. Meanwhile, Vivian had responded to this support by publicly humiliating her benefactor and then orchestrating elaborate deception campaigns when consequences followed. Uncle Frank, who had remained silent during the early part of the intervention, finally spoke up to corroborate Patricia's assessment. He confirmed that he had witnessed Vivian's Thanksgiving attack firsthand, and that my response had been both measured and appropriate under the circumstances. As the intervention collapsed around them, Marcus and Vivian made one final desperate attempt to salvage their position. They accused Patricia of being an outsider who had no right to interfere in family matters, and they questioned whether her presence proved that I was incapable of handling the situation independently. This attack backfired spectacularly. Patricia responded by pointing out that she had been invited to provide professional perspective on a situation where family members had demonstrated complete ignorance about my career and financial capabilities. She noted that seeking expert guidance was a sign of wisdom, not weakness. The intervention ended with several family members apologizing to me for participating in what they now recognized had been an orchestrated deception. Grandfather looked particularly shaken as he realized how completely he had been manipulated into supporting a narrative that bore no resemblance to reality. As people began leaving the house in uncomfortable silence, Vivian made one last attempt to salvage something from the wreckage. She approached me privately and offered to make a public apology in exchange for partial restoration of her funding. She suggested that we could work out a payment plan that would allow her to complete her education while acknowledging her mistakes. But her proposal revealed that she still fundamentally misunderstood the situation. She was treating this like a business negotiation where she could trade performative gestures for financial benefits. She had no genuine understanding of the emotional harm she had caused or the broken trust that could never be fully repaired. I looked at my sister and realized that the person I had been supporting all these years had never actually existed. The Vivian standing before me was someone who viewed relationships as transactional opportunities and family loyalty as a one-way obligation that others owed to her. With Patricia standing beside me as a witness, I delivered my final verdict. The trust fund would remain permanently closed, and Vivian would need to find her own path forward without my financial support. The aftermath of the failed intervention marked the beginning of a cascade of consequences that would reshape our family dynamics permanently. Within 48 hours of Patricia's devastating presentation, the carefully constructed narrative that Vivian and Marcus had been promoting completely collapsed under the weight of documented evidence and independent verification. The first crack appeared when Aunt Linda called to apologize for her participation in the ambush. After reviewing the financial documents that Patricia had shared, she realized the magnitude of my hidden contributions to the family and felt horrified about her role in trying to manipulate me into continuing them. Her apology opened the floodgates for other family members who had been misled about the situation. Cousin Sarah was particularly shaken when she learned about the child manipulation tactic. As a mother, she was appalled to discover that her daughter had been used as a prop in an adult conflict, especially one where she had been given completely false information about the underlying issues. She immediately called to apologize and promised that nothing like that would ever happen again. But the most significant vindication came from an unexpected source, Vivian's law school financial aid office. When she attempted to apply for emergency funding to replace the trust fund distributions, the investigation revealed discrepancies in her previous financial aid applications that triggered a comprehensive audit of her academic standing. The audit uncovered that Vivian had been falsely claiming financial hardship on scholarship applications, while simultaneously living a lifestyle that far exceeded what would be possible on the income levels she had reported. She had been double-dipping, accepting need-based aid while receiving substantial private funding that she had never disclosed to the institution. This discovery resulted in immediate academic probation and the revocation of several scholarships that she had received under false pretenses. The law school demanded repayment of approximately $43,000 in improperly awarded aid, creating an additional financial burden that made her situation even more desperate. Marcus's role in the deception campaign also caught up with him when screenshots of his text messages began circulating among their law school classmates. The legal community, even at the student level, takes issues of ethics and integrity extremely seriously. His reputation suffered significant damage when his peers learned about his manipulation tactics and systematic betrayal of trust. The law school's Honor Code Committee launched an investigation into Marcus's conduct, focusing particularly on his attempts to gather privileged information through deception and his role in orchestrating fraudulent financial aid applications. The investigation was ongoing, but the preliminary findings suggested that his graduation could be delayed or prevented entirely. Meanwhile, my own life began improving in ways that I had never anticipated. Patricia's support during the intervention had led to new professional opportunities that expanded my business beyond anything I had previously imagined. She recommended me for a major commercial contract that would require hiring additional technicians and potentially opening a second location. The contract involved retrofitting climate control systems for a chain of luxury hotels work that would showcase my company's capabilities and establish relationships with high-end commercial clients. The project timeline extended over 18 months, providing financial stability that would allow me to pursue additional certifications and expand into related service areas. But the professional growth was secondary to the personal healing that finally became possible once the toxic family dynamics were exposed and addressed. Uncle Frank emerged as a crucial ally who helped facilitate honest conversations with other family members about the destructive patterns that had enabled Vivian's behavior. These conversations revealed that several relatives had harbored concerns about Vivian's entitled attitude for years, but had never felt comfortable addressing them directly. My decision to enforce consequences had given them permission to acknowledge problems that everyone had been pretending not to see. Mom and Dad struggled the most with accepting the new reality. They had invested so much emotional energy in maintaining family harmony that they found it difficult to acknowledge the fundamental character flaws that had made that harmony impossible to sustain genuinely. However, individual therapy sessions helped them begin processing their own role in creating the family dynamic that had enabled Vivian's behavior. They started recognizing how their well-intentioned but misguided attempts to protect both daughters had actually prevented necessary accountability and growth. The most surprising development involved my relationship with some of Vivian's former law school friends. Several of them reached out privately to apologize for their behavior during Thanksgiving dinner, and to express admiration for how I had handled the subsequent challenges. These conversations revealed that Vivian had been systematically misrepresenting our family situation to her social circle, portraying herself as someone from a modest background who was working her way through school despite family obligations and limited resources. Her friends had assumed that her comments about my career were motivated by concern about financial security rather than social embarrassment. Learning the truth about the trust fund and my actual professional success changed their entire perspective on both Vivian's character and the broader issues surrounding class prejudice and educational assumptions. Several of them expressed interest in learning more about skilled trades careers and the entrepreneurial opportunities they offered. Spring semester arrived with Vivian scrambling to arrange alternative funding through a combination of student loans, part-time employment, and a significantly reduced lifestyle. She was forced to move out of her sorority house and into a shared apartment, give up her meal plan, and take a campus job that required working 20 hours per week while maintaining her course load. The adjustment was clearly difficult for someone who had never faced genuine financial constraints, but the experience provided valuable lessons about budgeting, time management, and personal responsibility that her previous lifestyle had never required her to develop. Most importantly, Vivian finally began acknowledging the real impact of her Thanksgiving behavior, rather than dismissing it as a misunderstanding that should be easily forgiven. The natural consequences of her actions had forced her to confront the ugliness of her own prejudices and the harm they had caused to someone who had been supporting her unconditionally. By summer, she had written a genuine apology letter that addressed the specific words she had used, acknowledged the financial support she had received, and accepted full responsibility for the consequences that followed her choices. The apology did not request forgiveness or restoration of funding. It simply recognized the harm she had caused and expressed authentic remorse. While our relationship would never return to its previous closeness, the apology created space for limited future interaction based on mutual respect, rather than the dysfunctional dynamic that had characterized our family for years. The trust fund situation had one final twist that provided perfect closure to the entire saga. Grandmother Rose's will included provisions that allowed me to redirect unused funds from Vivian's education account toward charitable purposes that aligned with the family's values. I chose to establish a scholarship fund for students from working-class backgrounds who were pursuing careers in skilled trades, renewable energy, or other technical fields that society often undervalues despite their crucial importance. The scholarship would provide both financial support and mentorship opportunities to help recipients build successful careers while maintaining pride in their chosen professions. The scholarship fund became a living memorial to Grandmother Rose's belief in the dignity of all honest work, and her conviction that family members should support each other's authentic aspirations rather than imposing their own social prejudices and expectations. Looking back on this experience, I learned that sometimes the most loving thing you can do for someone is to allow them to face the natural consequences of their choices. Enabling destructive behavior in the name of family loyalty actually prevents growth and accountability while perpetuating harmful patterns that damage relationships over time. I also discovered that my chosen family of mentors, colleagues, and genuine friends provided more authentic support and encouragement than blood relatives who viewed our relationships through the lens of social status and economic hierarchy. Have you ever had to choose between family loyalty and personal dignity? Has someone you supported ever turned around and attacked the very thing that made their lifestyle possible? Drop a comment below and share your story about times when family karma came back to teach important lessons. If this story resonated with your own experiences with workplace discrimination or family betrayal, hit that like button and subscribe for more real-life stories about justice being served. Share this video with anyone who needs to hear that standing up for yourself is never wrong, even when family pressure tries to convince you otherwise. Thank you for watching my journey from family scapegoat to empowered entrepreneur. Remember that your worth is not determined by other people's prejudices, and sometimes the best gift you can give someone is the opportunity to learn from their own mistakes. Until next time, keep building your own success story, regardless of who believes in you along the way.